There was a strong 6.4 magnitude earthquake that hit western Argentina on Sunday evening, and the epicenter of it was 15 miles southwest of the Argentine town of San Juan. Now, this was felt across the border in neighboring Chile, and it did end up shaking some buildings there in the capital, Santiago, but there were no reports of major damage or injuries, thankfully. Although the quake was strong, the center was also very deep. It struck at a depth of more than 70 miles, and that may have lessened some of the impact. Chile's Navy said there was no danger of a tsunami. The quake did cause some boulders to end up tumbling from mountains onto roadways, and you saw a lot of things that got shook up. Chile and Argentina are accustomed to frequent earthquakes.
Overseas tonight, we have learned of a powerful earthquake and now a tsunami warning we're tracking involving Fukushima, Japan, where another powerful earthquake struck 5 years ago, triggering that nuclear power plant disaster. ABC's Alex Marquardt monitoring the warnings at this hour from London. Alex?
Good evening, David. This quake struck just around 6 a.m. as people were waking up. It was felt for several minutes in the capital, Tokyo. The U.S. Geological Survey said it was a magnitude 6.9 and took place off the coast of Fukushima. Immediately, there were warnings of a tsunami and orders for citizens along the coast to evacuate and head to higher ground. So far, the waves hitting the coastline are only a few feet high, but the fear and pain are still fresh after the massive 2011 tsunami that caused a meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Tonight, there are still concerns around that plant and others in the area.
A 5.6 magnitude earthquake hit central New Zealand early Tuesday morning. It happened just off the coast of the North Island at a depth of more than 20 miles. Initial reports describe only minimal damage. It happened just a week after a powerful magnitude 7.8 quake rocked the country, triggering landslides and killing 2 people. There have been more than 1,000 aftershocks since then.
We're standing here in the Papatea Fault, a few kilometres south of the Clarence River Bridge on the Kaikoura coast. Looking here at the fault plane, the plane of movement along the fault itself, where this side here has moved up by about 1.5 metres, and we can see the gravels here and the gravels on that side. But what's really interesting is that we can see lines of movement here on this fault plane, which are moving down a little bit in this fashion. And that means we can see, it looks impressive that we're standing here 1.5 metres high, but in fact most of the movement has been along a plane something like this. So this side here has moved forwards by many, many metres. These fault scarps form very, very quickly. And we know from earthquake physics that probably this fault scarp ruptured across here at a speed of about 3 kilometres a second. So this has uplifted a very large area of new reef here, and the locals here describe not the earthquake noise, but the noise of water running off the top of this uplifted platform here. They said that the noise was just horrendous. And on the downthrown side of the fault, it's actually still even come up by about 1.5 metres. On the other side, there's as much as 6 metres of uplift.
Parts of the East Coast are bracing for more snow today. More than a foot buried cars and houses overnight in some places here in the Northeast. In many towns, the snow has been falling for days. In Lacona, New York, they got 40 inches there. More than 2 feet fell on Woodford, Vermont. Peru, Massachusetts saw 20 inches. Tony DeCopel is in the Tug Hill region. That's near Watertown, New York, where they are digging out from nearly 2 feet in that area. Tony, good morning.
Good morning, Gail. This is the Tug Hill region. As you say, the snowiest place in America last year. There's about 2 feet of snow on the ground here, 3 feet of snow on the ground not far from here. And the sheriff is concerned that when the wind starts blowing today, it's all going to end up back on the roadway, putting drivers in danger.
Heavy snow buried upstate New York overnight, piling on more than a day of accumulation and making roads nearly unusable. A driver died in a crash on Interstate 90 just west of Syracuse. To the north, 3 tractor trailers slid off the road.
Because it's so cold and it came on so fast, the roads are slick.
This sudden snowfall has Jefferson County Sheriff Colleen O'Neill concerned about people behind the wheel.
So you're at a high tempo right now.
Yeah, we have everybody working that's available, and I know that the road crews are out in full force.
People need to be aware and pay attention and slow down.
Deputy Steve Gruber has spent nearly 20 years in Jefferson County and says every winter brings the same problems.
You can go from bright sunshine into a lake effect snowstorm in the space of 2 to 3 miles, and visibility goes from unlimited to 20 feet in front of your car.
And the danger runs statewide.
Oh, it's going over.
Cell phone video shows the moment a bus filled with high school students from Rochester heading to New York City tipped over in Marathon, New York. The bus driver swerved to avoid hitting 2 vehicles that had spun out ahead of him.
We all kind of felt it tip slowly, and then when it fell, it was kind of just like really quick.
The driver and 10 students suffered only minor injuries.
Everybody was screaming, and then all of a sudden everybody was like, all right, everybody just remain calm.
And just as 48 million Americans hit the roads for the holiday, another storm could be developing behind this one. There are warnings in effect in the upper Midwest, and that could bring high winds and, yes, more snow to the Northeast later this week.
Yeah, enough. I don't want that red back getting beat. Get a voice suit as well. You send them off the fleet.
U.S. officials are planning to block new mining claims outside Yellowstone National Park. This decision comes as the Obama administration races to keep industry out of environmentally sensitive areas in its last days. Mining claims on 30,000 acres north of the nation's first national park would be prohibited for at least 2 years while a long-term ban is considered. Republicans and industry representatives have criticized the administration's actions to limit development. They promise to seek a reversal once Obama leaves office. Opponents argue mining would industrialize wild areas populated by grizzly bears, bighorn sheep, and other wildlife. They also think mining would harm streams that drain into the Yellowstone River and dampen tourism.
Scientists are warning of a new earthquake danger in California, and officials aren't taking any chances. Nearly 1,200 emergency responders took part in a massive earthquake drill last week. Mireya Villarreal has the story.
A magnitude 7.8 earthquake hits California, and the clock is ticking. Whoa! National Guardsmen are working to pull a trapped man from an elevator shaft, while a specially trained dog searches for stranded survivors. This drill is meant to help emergency responders prepare for the real thing.
You want to be the best prepared, the best trained, and the most efficient as possible.
But these extreme scenarios could easily become reality. USGS scientists recently discovered that 2 of the country's most dangerous faults, once thought to be at least 2 miles apart, are actually connected, creating one massive 118-mile-long fault. Using this acoustic device, they confirm that the Hayward Fault meets the Rogers Creek Fault in the shallow waters of the San Pablo Bay near San Francisco.
The longer a fault, the larger an earthquake it can produce. And if the Hayward and Rogers Creek faults went together along their entire length, it would be up to a magnitude 7.4.
What kind of damage are we talking about here?
More damage than Hurricane Katrina in terms of loss.
In 1906, the Great Quake leveled entire San Francisco neighborhoods, killing thousands. In 1989, the Loma Prieta quake killed 63 people and caused $6 billion in damage.
Folks in the Bay Area need to be prepared for a strong earthquake.
Watt's team is trying to predict the future by studying when earthquakes occurred here in the past and how often. When an earthquake occurs, the sediment along the fault line shifts, which creates a timestamp in the mud. Watt's team drops down these long tubes into the bay floor to collect samples. The cores are pulled from the water and cut.
pull this like a cheese cutter.
Sliced open.
Wow, awesome.
And photographed.
You can think of it as looking down through time. So we can find a date for those flat layers on top, and then the layers that are offset, we can bracket in the age of when that earthquake happened on that fault.
Watt's research will help scientists better understand these two faults, as their potential for damage makes emergency preparation like this even more essential. Mireya Villarreal, CBS News, Castaic, California.
相撞，在这37辆中间呢，大多数的车辆呢都是重型的货车，所以说呢，不排除在货车的车身下还压着其他的小的家用的客车这样的情况存在。所以说会随着这个救援工作的不断的开展，这个事故车辆的这个数字有可能还会发生新的变化。
Activists in Jerusalem hung a gay pride rainbow flag on the offices of the chief rabbinate, and that was in response to highly offensive comments made by the city's top Sephardic rabbi.
I call it a cult. It's a cult of abominations. It's obvious. It's an abomination. The Torah says it's punishable by death. It is in the first rank of severe offences.
This is not the first time that this rabbi, who is the chief rabbi of Jerusalem, has courted controversy. Last year, he declined to attend a memorial service for a teenager who was stabbed to death by an ultra-Orthodox zealot during last year's gay pride parade in Jerusalem. And at the time, he said that his refusal was because her family had refused to read aloud a condemnation of homosexuality that he had included in a condolence letter that he sent to them. Now, naturally, his latest comments have evoked reaction from all sectors of Israeli society. There are several politicians who've spoken out against him. Yesterday, Sunday, gay rights activists hung a gay pride flag, as you mentioned, outside the offices of the Jerusalem Chief Rabbinate, and they later protested in front of the building. A complaint has also been filed with the Israeli police, saying that his comments constitute incitement to bigotry, and there have also been calls for him to retract what he said. So on the whole, he hasn't received much support, but it is worth mentioning that Israel's online right-wing media outlet, Arutz Sheva, has run opinion pieces supporting the rabbi.
I think that all of us should be able to recognize each other's difference and get along with each other instead of saying horrible things about each other.
We are here to support the rabbi that is talking on behalf of the Jews, on behalf of the Torah.
Now, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the main political figures in the ruling government coalition have chosen to remain silent. They don't want to get involved in what many see as a potentially explosive issue.
And a Massachusetts college will no longer be flying the American flag on campus. Hampshire College protesters putting the flag at half-staff after the election because Trump was elected. It was then burned on Veterans Day. The school is now taking down all flags while they consult with students on how to use them appropriately. Great.
We turn next to a new message just released tonight by President-elect Donald Trump. Cameras all weekend long capturing leading contenders for his cabinet, a very public display. Some of the visitors, including former Governor Mitt Romney, once bitter foes of Mr. Trump. And tonight, the new message just in from Mr. Trump. And here's ABC's David Wright.
Tonight from Trump Tower, a new video message from the president-elect.
Our transition team is working very smoothly, efficiently, and effectively. Truly great and talented men and women, patriots indeed, are being brought in, and many will soon be a part of our government.
His first words at length to the American people in more than a week. No speeches or news conferences since election night. Well, we have seen a revolving door of meetings. The job applicants seen competing. That's Senator Scott Brown, hoping to lead the Department of Veterans Affairs.
And who do you think you're competing with for the position?
Hey, listen, I'm not competing with anybody. You know, I think I'm the best person.
Some of the meetings, like former Governor Rick Perry today, leave the impression Trump may be forming a team of rivals. Perry was an outspoken foe in the primaries.
Let no one be mistaken. Donald Trump's candidacy is a cancer on conservatism, and it must be clearly diagnosed, excised, and discarded.
Now he's a contender for energy secretary. Likewise, there's former Governor Mitt Romney, who said this about Trump.
There's plenty of evidence that Mr. Trump is a con man, a fake.
Now he's in the mix for Secretary of State.
Went great.
Romney was diplomatic.
I appreciate the chance to speak with the president-elect and look forward to the coming administration.
Do you still think he's a con artist, sir?
Presidential transitions are always a delicate dance, but typically the auditions of the possible dance partners happen well away from the public eye. Over the past 3 days, at least 29 people came to pay court, either at Trump's clubhouse in New Jersey or the gilded lobby of Trump Tower. Not all of them will end up in the cabinet. There are also Trump loyalists with good reason to expect a plum job. With Chris Christie standing next to him, Trump was asked, would he get a job?
Is there a place for Governor Christie in your administration?
He's a very talented man. Great guy. Smart and tough. See you later.
Trump clearly enjoys the suspense.
Well, we've made a couple of deals, but we'll let you know soon.
But some applicants unwittingly offered clues. Chris Kobach, an immigration hardliner from Kansas, walked in clutching this memo, outlining a plan to revamp the Department of Homeland Security. All aliens from high-risk areas are tracked, the document says. Kobach has in the past proposed a Muslim registry. Incoming Chief of Staff Reince Priebus insists that's a non-starter.
Look, I'm not going to rule out anything, but I wouldn't. We're not going to have a registry based on a religion.
Other meetings are kept under the radar altogether. President-elect Trump now says he's doing America's business, not his own. But these real estate developers building Trump Towers in India say this photo was taken after the election.
After the election, and so David Wright is with us live tonight. And David, the Trump team has been asked how he will separate himself from his business now that he's president-elect.
And that is a huge question, David. Donald Trump is doing business in at least 18 countries, deals worth more than $54 million. Here's what Kellyanne Conway, his senior advisor, had to say today. He's a businessman. He is also the president-elect, and she acknowledged we're in uncharted waters, unprecedented times is the term she used.
America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity.
That video was taken at an alt-right conference in Washington, D.C. on Saturday. Richard B. Spencer is president and director of the National Policy Institute, which claims to be dedicated to the heritage, identity, and future of people of the European descent in the United States and around the world. In other words, it's a white nationalist think tank. Those who share this ideology flocked to Donald Trump during the Republican primary and general election. The president-elect has been criticized for not keeping his distance from the movement.
The senior advisor is a Nazi.
Steve Bannon, now the president-elect's chief strategist, used to be an executive at Breitbart News, which anti-hate groups have described as an alt-right and white nationalist media platform. Similar white nationalist and anti-immigrant sentiments have been popping up around the world. The UK's decision to leave the EU was partly influenced by a similar movement.
It is our creation. It is our inheritance, and it belongs to us.
An Italian restaurant in Washington, D.C. has apologized for inadvertently hosting a white nationalist group Friday night. On its Facebook page, Maggiano's Little Italy said it wasn't aware it was hosting the alt-right National Policy Institute. The restaurant said the reservation was made at the last minute under a different name. After the event, an attendee's tweet appeared to show a Heil Hitler salute, which Maggiano's called extremely offensive. The National Policy Institute made headlines the next day for remarks made during a conference.
America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity.
Maggiano's added it will donate $10,000 in profits from that Friday night to the Anti-Defamation League, a Jewish-based organization that combats hateful speech.
Fake news has become increasingly, maddeningly, disturbingly popular, especially on Facebook. I'm talking here about websites that deliberately post phony stuff or hyper-partisan sites that run many distorted stories. Now, a BuzzFeed study found the 20 most popular bogus election stories from fake or hyper-partisan sites drew more comments and more engagement than the 20 most popular stories from legitimate newspapers, networks, and websites. Not that I'm agreeing with everything they do. Hundreds of thousands of people click on such phony junk as Pope Francis endorsed Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton sold weapons to ISIS. One such bozo bragged to the Washington Post that he helped influence the election, which is ludicrous. But look, this is a cancer on the news business. Even President Obama got into the act at a news conference in Berlin.
If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not. And particularly in an age of social media where so many people are getting their information in sound bites and snippets off their phones. If we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems.
Mark Zuckerberg said this week the social network would crack down by kicking fake sites off its advertising network. Google is promising a similar purge. But here's the problem. Zuckerberg has already admitted that its trending topics discriminated against conservative stories and fired the staff. But can he hire people objective enough not to lean one way or another, especially when stories are either partially fake or partially distorted for partisan reasons? Zuckerberg denies it, but he now runs a media company, a very powerful media company, and that means he needs to impose some minimal standards, even affecting the too-good-to-check material that your crazy uncle wants to share.
We are back with the Fox News alert. A potentially deadly terror attack in Times Square foiled, apparently.
Mohammed Rafiq Naji, an Uber driver right here in New York, is under arrest, accused of trying to join ISIS overseas. Officials say he also discussed plans to use a garbage truck to go into Times Square and run crowds over.
He was an Uber driver?
Yep.
Well, apparently his inspiration, last summer's deadly Bastille Day attack in Nice, France. The New York City Police Department is now stepping up security to prevent that kind of truck attack on the Thanksgiving parade 2 days from now.
Thank you to the investigators who thwarted this attack. The department stationing sand-filled garbage trucks along the parade route to stop any potential threats.
All right. We'll keep you posted on that.
Pope Francis has declared that while abortion is still a grave sin in the eyes of the Catholic Church, priests can now forgive abortions upon confession. Catholic Church law traditionally demands that anyone who gets or aids in an abortion is automatically excommunicated. But in a letter to the Catholic Church, the Pope writes, "I henceforth grant to all priests, in virtue of their ministry, the faculty to absolve those who have committed the sin of procured abortion. I wish to restate as firmly as I can that abortion is a grave sin, since it puts an end to an innocent life. In the same way, however, I can and must state that there is no sin that God's mercy cannot reach and wipe away when it finds a repentant heart seeking to be reconciled with the Father." Notre Dame professor of New Testament and early Christianity, Candida Moss, joins me now to talk about the forgiveness in the Catholic Church. Candida, good to see you.
Great to see you too, Glenn.
So take us through what this all means. I mean, we always knew, and we've talked about this in the past, that Pope Francis was going to be a sort of a revolutionary pope in that he was very non-traditional. But give me a sense, for those who are not Catholic, what the sense of forgiveness, how it works in the Catholic religion.
Well, in the Catholic Church, when someone commits a sin, sort of a grave sin, and abortion would be one of the gravest sins you could commit, you have to go to a priest and ask for confession. And the priest has the power to absolve you of that sin. And after you've gone to confession, that's when you can go back to communion and fully participate in church life. Now, because abortion has been held as this incredibly grave sin, especially here in North America, people have traditionally been excommunicated for having abortions. But Francis, from the beginning of his ministry, has emphasized that the role of the church is actually not to judge people, it's to offer them forgiveness. And he's now extending that as a sort of permanent act of his ministry to priests the world over.
Could Pope Francis face any blowback from cardinals, from others within the religion, and even from the faithful?
Absolutely. In fact, just recently, some cardinals wrote a letter to Pope Francis in which they demanded that he answer their doubts about his recent encyclical, Amoris Laetitia. And so he's going to face blowback from those, like, for example, Cardinal Burke, who think that Pope Francis has to take a more hardline position on things like the family, divorce, and abortion. I think there's going to be some blowback from conservatives within the church.
Is there a sense at all, Candida, and I hate to inject politics into religion, especially in a country where we have a separation of church and state, but do you think that the Pope's decision at all to allow priests to absolve the sin of abortion is in any way related to the recent election of Donald Trump?
I think this is actually an excellent question. To answer it, it's not Trump-provoked, but it's certainly Trump-aware. Francis is aware that President-elect Trump has been very harsh when it's come to abortion, and that when he spoke about the Supreme Court, this was how he was appealing to a lot of Christians in North America. I think the key thing to remember is that Pope Francis sees preterm infants as part of a vulnerable category that includes a lot of people. So when he says there should be mercy to those who have had abortions, he's also saying there should be mercy towards other members of this vulnerable group, and that group includes immigrants. So for Francis, by taking this sort of softer approach to forgiving people, although he thinks exactly the same things about abortion, he is in a way beckoning President-elect Trump to be softer and merciful towards immigrants.
All right. Pope Francis is relatively young compared to past popes, and he looks to be in relatively healthy condition. But could the next pope overturn any of these doctrines?
Well, the next pope could strike a new tone, because Pope Francis hasn't actually changed any doctrines. He's encouraging those in the church to be more understanding and more compassionate. So the tone could revert back to more hardline positions on things like marriage equality. But I don't think that any future pope is going to say that priests do not have the ability to offer forgiveness to people in the confessional, because that's really been the church's position all along.
All right, Canada, last question, because we've been talking about this sort of from the reference point of the Vatican. But if somebody goes to their local parish church and they say to the priest, look, I've had an abortion or I've assisted in an abortion and I'm looking for forgiveness at my Saturday confession, could the priest say you can't have it?
Well, theoretically, yes. I mean, a priest could decide that he's going to do that. Should he do that? Not really, but I think a lot of American Catholics are already fairly strategic about the ways in which they attend the confessional. So already savvy Catholics tend to go to priests that they know are more liberal and forgiving when it comes to getting forgiveness in the confessional.
All right. Canada Moss, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Great to see you.
At the Vatican today, Pope Francis elevated 17 bishops to cardinals, including 3 Americans. Seth Doan tells us about the new princes of the Catholic Church.
Pope Francis placed those signature cardinal-colored skull caps on the 17 newest members of this exclusive club. The Pope referenced their diversity as he expressed worry about increasing polarization and exclusion in the world. He called it a virus.
Your Excellency, I'm Seth Doan with CBS News. First of all, congratulations.
Nice to meet you. This afternoon, we met now Cardinal Joseph Tobin, who as Indianapolis Archbishop clashed with Vice President-elect Mike Pence over resettling refugees. We asked if the Pope's message was a political statement aimed at America.
Well, I don't know if it had anything to do with the U.S. election, because I think you can see similar movements in many parts of the world.
Another new American cardinal, Blaise Cupich, shared the pontiff's concerns.
It's getting out of hand in society today, where people almost have this contagious inflammation of animosity towards each other because they're different. They speak a different language. They look different.
Just before he became cardinal, former Dallas Bishop Kevin Farrell told us he agreed with Pope Francis's desire to have a church that's closer to the people.
Is this Pope choosing people like you because he's trying to shape the College of Cardinals in selecting the next Pope?
Whether he's trying to stack the deck, as we would say, I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe in that.
Faith and flying go hand in hand. Just boarding a plane, you're putting faith in the pilot and crew. But Marley Hall found religious acts of faith are becoming more common at America's airports, where chapels help travelers stay grounded before they fly.
Faisal El Ansari is flying to Morocco for business. His nearly 12-hour journey began here at the Islamic Center at John F. Kennedy International Airport.
By doing this, I'm fulfilling my duties toward my Creator.
This small mosque is filled with travelers and airport employees. Imam Ahmet Yusaturk says attendance is growing. For Muslims, it is very important to have a space like this so they can go inside without disturbing anybody, pray, connect with God, and go on their way.
More than half of the nation's busiest airports have a dedicated space for worship. Most are interfaith, but here at JFK, there are 4 separate chapels, one for each major religion.
The Islamic Center, a synagogue, and a Catholic and Protestant church are side by side in Terminal 4. Father Christian Piasta heads up the Catholic chapel, Our Lady of the Skies.
There's a full-fledged congregation here.
Yes. Well, JFK is a city that employs about 36,000 employees. That's bigger than many parishes.
But Father Piasta spends most of his time reaching out to passengers on the go. He calls it sweeping the terminal.
I'm looking for any sign of distress.
Most of the time, people want directions. Others need more.
People are very stressed when they enter the airport, and we find that the chapel is a place where they can find some peace.
And for many travelers, it's time well spent. Marley Hall, CBS News, New York.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for Square Off Quickies, and they are hot. Starting with a Baltimore City teacher who went on a tirade Tuesday at Harlem Park Elementary Middle School, caught on a student's phone yelling, "If you don't get an education, you will wind up being a punk-ass N-word who's going to get shot." City Schools Chief Sonia Santolis appalled. The teacher was fired.